Well, ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between, the time has come once again for yet another series of Inside Number 9. This time for Series A, we have 5 unique episodes fresh out of the oven, and 5 tales for Steve Pemberton and Reece Shearsmith have weaved in their uniquely comedic and dark way. And seeing as how I did Series 7 last time and The Bones of St. Nicholas, we're going to go through every new episode as I express my thoughts on each one, because if there's one guy you can trust, it's a random person on the internet. So, without further ado, let's dive into Series 8 of Inside Number 9. So, let's talk a little bit about not the show this time, but instead the fandom. Honestly, I'm really surprised that a show like Inside Number 9 has gained a large amount of fans for a show that's quite hard to commercialize, but fortunately it was able to attract weird nerds obsessed with horror and odd stuff from all around the world, including me. Now, the nature of fandom creates many different effects on the show, and now that each fan is trying to guess the twist once they just get the slightest bit of info and trying to come up with basic plots for episodes of their own, Steve and Reece have now had to formulate their approach to writing the show and appeasing the fans. This was touched on Simon Says, but now it seems like they've finally come to address it by finally writing a bus episode, which the fandom has longed for so long. So, the question is, does Hold On Tight live up to expectations? In the fabled Bus Number 9 episode, we follow Wolfie and Clark, who absolutely love their favourite red bus. Not as much as Mr. Cole and his Dolly Bird nieces, but as the episode continues on, Wolfie and Clark... Okay, let's cut the shit. You all know what this episode is truly about, so let's not waste any time and get on to what the actual episode I'll be reviewing this week is. Yes, the bus episode has been pulled off the air, and instead we watch a game show, 3x3, hosted by Lee Mack, where 3 teams of 3 try to get as many points as possible through general knowledge, as Lee spouts out some quick-witted remarks and the audience has a fun time. Aside from your usual new questions, everything looks like it's going to be a-okay. Yep, nothing sinister or unusual is afoot, just a standard old half hour of 3x3, because everybody has watched 3x3 before and know how it works. Before we get into the nitty-gritty details of the episode, and believe me, it's actually harder to talk about than you may think, I want to acknowledge my appreciation for just how well Steve and Reece managed to nail the feel of a British game show. Everything from the set design, effects, and just overall feel really captured the look and sound of one of these midday, late afternoon game shows you just put on in the background. This is mostly due to the direction of Barbara Wiltshire, who's also had a hand in directing the actual shows 3x3 is mostly cribbing from, not to mention the performances of the contestants in the episode, as well as Lee Mack, who does his usual habit of cracking quick-fire jokes which range from light-hearted remarks about the questions to unintentional foreshadowing.
So you know what I think.
So what you mean, Margaret?
On that note, let's talk a little bit more about the contestants themselves, or more specifically the Oakwoods, as the other 2 groups are basically not all that important. No disrespect to the actors, but they just aren't. Right off the bat, the Oakwoods stick out like a sore thumb with their strange dynamic and attitude towards answering questions, not helped by their interactions with each other. And while Stephen seems to be relatively normal, Margaret and Catherine are anything but, and they are the essential focus of the broadcast, creating a strange and off-putting presence as the episode progresses, and they try to keep up appearances and play by the game's rules. The basic structure of the episode is the basic structure of most daytime game shows. 3 rounds ending on the final round and you're done in half an hour. And while it may be a great standard for an actual game show, unfortunately for number 9 it isn't really all that great. I know the whole point was to trick people into thinking this was something not even related to the show, but once you rewatch it, it unfortunately falls flat and just results in something that's slow-paced and experimental, but to the point where it almost drags on. The only little things to keep the audience engaged being the little interactions the Oakwoods have and Catherine using her powers to her advantage to make it to the very end.
In Wormwood, Oakwoods.
Matilda.
Correct. Who was the self-appointed Oakwoods?
Matthew Hopkins.
Witchfinder General. Correct.
I don't really mean to sound overly harsh or hyperbolic, and maybe it's just because Inside Number 9 has had a unhealthy grip on my brain, but I was kind of left wanting more from the episode itself, especially after rewatching it. I feel like it doesn't really make for an interesting journey aside from making note of the hints towards Catherine's secret powers. As a little aside, I usually record some notes while doing a second rewatch of an episode for these reviews, and they usually go about 2 or 3 pages, and this episode is the same, but it's just me pointing out the little hints to the twist and nothing much else really. I mean, if you like the episode, I can't really stop you from having your own opinion and all power to you. As for my thoughts on the episode, it kind of ends here. And to repeat myself, I mean my thoughts on the episode. So, now that I've reviewed the episode, what exactly is there left to talk about? Well, I know I don't usually do these when making a review, but I feel like it's necessary to recognise the initial fan reception to the episode. It's fair to say that reactions from both fans and non-fans alike have been mixed, to say the least. Some are praising it and considering it to be one of the best episodes of the show, while others call it a bunch of boring tripe, and those who are smart are not starting to voice their opinions on social media. And I think really this was supposed to be the main point of the episode. Inside Number 9 is a show that's often sold to people as an anthology with really great twists, but really, the twist should be second fiddle to, the quality of the actual episode. So what Stephen Rees have done here is play on that to an exaggerated degree, making a slow and low-stakes journey in order to further emphasize this point. Not to mention, 3x3 is here in replacement for the bus episode, which by itself is a joke on how buses always arrive late on time, but also presents a further meta element into the episode. As I said, many fans get inspired by the show and often create their own ideas for plots and or episodes, and it seems like a majority only focus on giving only settings and twists, boiling down the show into two things which, while fundamentally, barely make up any of the skeleton that holds an episode together. A common idea for fan episodes would be a Number 9 set on a bus, which Stephen Rees have nobly been aware of for some time now, even pulling off a fake set of promo pictures with Robin Asquith and including fake clips in the trailer just to fool us even more, and focus on the bus episode while we disregard the other episodes that are shown in the trailer, which are real. I know when I was going through Reddit or Twitter or Discord, most people were excited to see the bus episode above all things, even though we barely knew anything about it except for a half-baked plot and a rough idea on what it could be. And that kinda sounds familiar, doesn't it? However, while this experiment in fandom fallout is certainly interesting, I don't think it majorly affects the episode if I'm looking at it based entirely on its content. While I will admit that the background story is intriguing, Catherine forcibly being a guinea pig for her mum's experiments, and being on the show being simply just a way for Margaret to see whether her powers have any effect, it's unfortunately mixed with what is kind of a middling first and second act. I will admit that the finale is good though, and it certainly does leave an impression, but since I was for sure this was just a Number 9 trick, it didn't really have the massive effect it intended for. But still, I will give credit where credit is due.
Catherine, come and join me. Sadly, the Oakwood family didn't manage to win the jackpot tonight, but join us next week when we...
Before I actually give my final thoughts, I also want to mention one episode that looms heavily over this one, that of course being Deadline. Even though I never did see it live, Deadline is still an enthralling, intense episode to watch and is one of my personal favourites in the entire show. Now, why exactly does Deadline work for me, but not 3x3? Well, there's three main reasons at play. Number one, I'm slightly biased since Deadline was technically the first time I ever heard about Inside Number 9 through Inside of Mine's video. Number two, it was probably hyped up and played with audience expectations. Deadline was hyped up to the moon, and when the episode itself falls and flatlines, it actually felt unique and distressing. 3x3 was never given any public knowledge, and watching it live, the only reason we even knew Hold On Tight wouldn't air was because of a brief message said by the continuity announcer before it aired, and nothing else. And number three, Deadline was done first, and in my opinion, better. Deadline itself comes at a really unique point in the show where it hadn't really gained as large a fandom as it has now, and as a result, Stephen Rees were able to effectively seed the clues towards this episode without worry that possessive fans try to pick on minute details and guess how the episode plays out. But now, they don't have the liberty of doing that, and instead all they can do is simply air it out and pretend Hold On Tight was supposed to play for the fans, as it's too late to say it was just delayed and this random game show is airing instead, or do the Deadline thing again and have small clips filmed, but over time have the episode go unfinished and lead into this episode. I really hope I don't come across as negative in this review, because I really am not. I still don't think there is a bad episode of the show by any means, and while it may not be my personal favourite, there are still things in there which I can appreciate, but I do think it's kind of telling when writing about the fallout of the episode is more entertaining than writing about the actual episode itself for the script on just what kind of an episode it is. I personally respect the hell out of what Stephen Rees have done for the episode, and while it may not have played out brilliant for me, the episode itself still has its merits, even if we didn't get the fabled bus episode. And again, if you did like this episode, then that's okay. I'm just spouting my own views as someone who thinks a bit too deeply about a rather niche show.